Welcome to the Building Blocks podcast, where we discuss the career paths of leaders in the energy, utility, and construction fields to better understand the habits, routines, and mindset that has built these successful men and women. I'm your host, Brad Coleman. It took me 20 years to understand my strengths. My goal is to identify the common traits of leaders in our industry to provide you with the tools you need to be successful in a fraction of that time. Thank you for listening. For more information on these guests and others, please come find me on LinkedIn. Thank you for listening. For more information on these guests and others, please come find me on LinkedIn. Welcome to the Building Blocks podcast. I'm your host, Brad Coleman. We talk to industry professionals in the utility space, up and down the supply chain, from production to burner tip, to talk about the industry, talk about leadership development in the industry, particularly speaking with those of us that are a little more experienced and have been around for a little while through all the changes that we've seen throughout the years, ups and downs and peaks and valleys, to kind of get ideas from them about what the career path that they've taken, how they ended up here where they are today. Always ends up with some interesting stories, because what we find is nobody's career paths are linear. We're finding that more and more the more we talk to people. And so we like talking about those sorts of things, because we don't want kids coming out of college to think that there's always going to be one set career path that you kind of have to be set toward and stuck to. Today, we're talking to Andy Shingledecker. He's the quality control engineer for Z. They are more on the production side. It'll be very interesting, because I've always been on the opposite side, being in the distribution space. So talking to somebody here on the production side today, and they're in emissions control. So he also gets into the environmental aspects a lot. Andy, if you would give us a little background on you and kind of where you started in the industry and how you ended up where you are today.
Yeah, it's a family industry, I guess. I had an uncle who was superintendent for Shingl Pipeline based here in Tulsa for, I think, 46, 47 years. Got introduced to the pipeline world, all things associated with it through him. Joined the Pipeliners Union, Local 798, had been with them ever since. Still an active member. I've hung up my welding, gotten into the inspection side about 10 or so years ago, got into construction management, project management, that sort of stuff. I grew up in pipelines, mostly natural gas, some liquid, have been all over the country building them, the welder foreman, assistant superintendent. When I switched gears, I did go to college, which is slightly rare in that field. I got an engineering degree from the University of Wyoming with a mechanical background. Never used it up until recently, but welding's a hard occupation. I love the trade. I advocate for the trade, especially mine. It's tough on your body. I'm glad I started when I was a young man. I'm glad I put the time in when I was young to get to where I am now. I still am out there like pushing and doing my best to advocate for other people to follow my footsteps, but it's hard physically to do that work. And for me, I got to a point where I wanted to focus more on my brain, less on my back. And that started the transition into, construction management, project management, getting into the inspection side. I currently hold a CWI, hold an AMP level 2 for coatings, a level 1 for cathodic protection, and an ASNT level 2, which is your Society of Non-Destructive Testing. So that's the short cliff notes of it. I've been in and around with engineering firms, pipeline construction companies, kind of my go-to business. ZVAC is the biggest departure from that main line. Lately, we're in the cross compression space. So making sure that companies can avoid venting and flaring natural gas, methane mitigation. We make machines that kind of pump that from one section to another so that they can keep that line shut down, but also keep lines in service at the same time for repair and maintenance. So it's a little new and different for me. It's a space I've been adjacent to, but it kind of feeds my need to be more environmentally conscious and do something to kind of better the world that we're living in.
That's a really interesting point, because one of the things that I'm working on a lot right now is what I call just the natural gas ecosystem. is there, no matter where your area of passion, there's always some sort of application for it, it seems like, within the industry. And you don't think much of relating somebody that has environmental interest in the natural gas industry. I mean, we know, those of us that are in the industry know how clean burning it is, but there are emissions concerns and lost gas situations and that sort of thing. So I think that's really important to highlight. I hadn't heard it from that perspective. You know, what the example that I've always used was, if you consider yourself a software person, if you're really into software, there's going to be a future. Well, there's going to be a future in every industry, but there's going to be a future in natural gas for sure, as we change and move into the next generation of young people coming out of college. The emissions space, particularly, I think is critical. Just, I don't know that it's a new occurrence, but how long have we really been focused on emissions in the industry? It's been a relatively new development, hasn't it?
I feel like it. I would agree. It's something that the flavor of the day, right? It's, pink is the new black kind of scenario, that this is what we're looking at. If you want to be relevant, relatable, reliable in the current time, then you need to talk about methane mitigation, whether that's through, kind of like I don't want to use everybody's brand name. Canary has a really great inspection tool, right? Distran makes a really great inspection tool for that. Or if you're on our side of it, where you want to make the tool that eliminates the need to do that, right? I think there's lots of spaces that kind of fall into that or adjacent to it. That's one of the things I like to talk about at AMP conferences, is adjacent industries that should be here that aren't here. And I think for us in natural gas, in the environmental side, and leaks and methane, a previous employer of mine at Cell Energy in Colorado, they're tracking this cradle to grave, from when the natural gas is pulled from the earth and drilled for, all the way to the customer's meter. They're tracking that at a level to tell the customer, you are buying gas that is 99.99 methane leak free. We've done everything in our power to make sure all the gaskets are proper, all the bolts are torqued and tightened. We don't have any leaks. Our compressors don't leak. All these different steps to make sure the gas gets out of the ground to their house without losing anything on the way.
I've never heard that. Didn't even know that existed, that it was a thing. But it's really smart to be talking about that in the space, because I know you probably made up the 99% number, but it probably is about that efficient. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, because that's always been one of the big talking points of the natural gas industry, is if you're using, let's say you're using electric vehicles, well, guess what? That energy is probably coming from power generation through natural gas. And when we're not looking at the full cycle of the source of the energy, now there's a lot more. This was a bigger talking point 10 or 15 years ago. There's a lot more renewables energy being put on the grid today, but I mean, they still come with their own impact as far as that goes. But as far as natural gas, beyond the drilling and the pipelines and moving it from point A to point B, there's no energy lost the same way that there is with other factors. And I think that's something that we definitely need to be talking more about in the industry as well. I'll need to look up that Excel. Go ahead.
And it's a consciousness, right? It's a conscious effort. I know they're not the only one playing in that space, but it's exactly what you said. They're trying to make this conscious effort to say, we're doing everything to get this to you. It's almost like a farm to table scenario. Everybody gets all excited about they're going to hit the local farmer's market. Like, it's funny for me. I watch my wife do that, and she's very particular. Like, she's checking out the boxes they're bringing the produce in on. She's like, well, they bought that off a truck. They're just down at Benny Keith buying this stuff and bringing it to the farmer's market and reselling it, versus the people that have vegetables that look like they came from a garden. And that, you can spot that if you really look at it. I would never notice it. She points it out, and I'm like, oh man, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the space in natural gas is changing and evolving, right? Our energy space is changing and evolving. And there's the energy addition is a much better term than energy transition. And there's a few of us throwing that around. I spent a little bit of time as an ops manager at a power plant in Colorado for Excel. Brand new world for me. way out of my comfort zone, way out of what I'm used to. But it was predominantly natural gas burner. And knowing that we had other coal plants online in our system is really hard for me. I don't see the purpose behind it. We have natural gas, far exceeds that. We've got other backups, because that's usually the argument in the industry is, well, it's a great alternative backup. I get that to some extent. It's just really dirty comparatively nowadays. And I think we have to ride a little bit of the fence to go, yeah, but what are we doing to be better? How are we making those steps? I never realized, I always looked at wind and solar as a great alternative. I know they're not a fix all. It really soured me on wind though, because from an ops manager position at a power plant, you look at wind and it's a crapshoot. The wind might blow, it might not blow, a storm might come in. It's so unpredictable. At least solar's predictable. It comes on at daylight, it shuts off at night. It's pretty simple. And you get a certain amount of megawatt for that investment. With wind, it's all over the map on what you get for your investment per megawatt. And as you translate that, like you said earlier, if you are plugging an electric car, chances are that power that you're recharging your vehicle with is coming from a fossil fuel. And we need to be okay with that, because that's what works right now. That's our best alternative.
But to your point, people are becoming more conscious of the full user cycle. I forget the term for that, the full end-to-end cycle, right? And so, I mean, it's good to know. I'm glad that people are asking the questions.
So we're more educated though too. Like there's so many people that are dare I say anti-natural gas, and they shouldn't be, right? Yeah. SGA runs the whole natural gas champions. It's a class, amazing class. And it's one of those things I wish more people knew about. And you know, the class with SGA teaches you how to talk to your neighbor when they say something silly. Like, I sure wish they'd get rid of that natural gas power plant. And you go, oh no, that's a horrible idea. This is why, right? I'm so excited they're going to ban natural gas stoves in this city. And you go, oh, that's a horrible idea. This is why. It gives you reasoning behind, gives you math, gives you statistics, gives you everything you need to make a formulated, educated argument for those folks to go, you know, get your news from more than one source, talk to more than one person, and, you know, make your own educated choice, but make sure it's an educated choice.
Yeah, I completely agree, because we need more educated conversations among everyone. And the truth is usually somewhere in the middle, right? And a proper balance is probably going to include the right mix of renewables and fossil fuels. I'm very biased, but I've always thought natural gas is a good alternative to coal that is also, we have a very large supply of very cheaply and burns very clean, you know? So I hope that going forward, we can look at more of an overall picture of our energy sector in the U.S. as kind of a little bit of everything. And then we can kind of pick and choose based on the most ideal situation for each. Going back to like when you started as a welder and you started to transition more, I couldn't help but think of my own dad. My dad was a welder and pipe fitter, and he actually had a degree. He actually went to college first, didn't like working in an office, went to work shutdowns in the field, and was a welder and pipe fitter up until his 40s, when he said, I realized I'm not going to be able to do this forever. Went back to school, got his education degree, and then went to be an ag teacher where he could teach kids to weld, and has been doing that for the last 30 years. So, I mean, it's been a wonderful transition for him. Was that a conscious decision? It sounds like you were saying, I've got to look for something else that's going to be better for my knees and back and for the rest of my career. I mean, what prompted that? How did you take the steps to be able to make that move?
Man, it's a long time, right? You make a lot of connections, you make a lot of friends, and it's a small world. That pipeline world is a very small world. And over those years, you know, you start making connections with hopefully people that advocate for you on a personal level, but also know who and what you are. And I describe it to when I'm talking to younger folks and kind of people that are in the same maybe position where they're wanting to do a shift. I said, you got to be very self-aware first and foremost, and don't placate, pander to yourself either. Be brutally honest, self-aware, and do that to a point where when you look at stuff, you can go, hey, I know I'm this. And I describe it like a snapshot. So there's still people out there that when they hear my name or see me, the picture in their mind, I have on a khaki shirt, I've got a welding hood on top of my head, and there is a black welding truck behind me. That's the picture they see because that's who they know. I've had an opportunity to change that. And, credit being given, I had already been inspecting for a long time at that point, but that's so similar. It's so in alignment, but it's way easier work, more mentally taxing. But I took a job. We wanted to go back to Colorado. I had a friend offer me a job, went there for Excel Energy, for Michael's Pipeline. And it's the first time we didn't haul our RV. I were talking, I said, let's just move, like, forget it. We'll leave the RV here. We'll move, get an apartment. Let's just jump in. And before I left, the rep that I dealt with at Excel had started recruiting. Hey, I want you to be in our department. It's gas governance. It's great. It's right in your wheelhouse. That individual saw something in me, and we still talk to this day. He's moved on to another company too, but he saw something beyond that khaki shirt and the welding hood. And so it gave me a point to change my picture of me and change it for everybody that I met after that point. And it's almost like resumes. So when you're applying for a job, everybody should have 2 at a minimum. Some people have 3, right? You want your resume to fit where you're going and what you're wanting to do. And I think that's the thing. You need to build a lot of the folks have been following lately on LinkedIn talk specifically about personal branding. And I think that's exactly what it was. I didn't know that at the time, but that's your personal brand. That's your recognition of how people see you and what you are. As we got the opportunity to change that to someone in management, someone with leadership ability, and start selling more of the times when I was a welder foreman, when I was an assistant superintendent on the construction side, and go, there's a part of me that's managerial. There's a part of me that loves operations, that has run my own businesses. And now I sell that side. I sell that picture to people. That's the one I pull out to go, hey, this is me. This is what I do. And for the kids, and I say that loosely because it's not always kids, but for people coming into our industry and our world, like, that's the big play, right? Make sure you're aware of your personal brand and what you're putting out there. And 2, I had a really great run in. Oklahoma State University has Institute of Tech here, which is part of the OSU school system, but it's more trade based, right? Funnels right into electrical linemen, pipeline, all kind of thing. And we ran into a group of kids and their instructor at a Tulsa Pipelines event, golf, maybe shooting event, something. And, at that point, they were asking me project management questions. That's what I want to be. I want to be a project manager. What about this? What about this? And me and my good friend, Chris Lorette, were standing there, and Chris and I both been project managers. And Chris will tell you he is an office project manager, right? He can run his stuff in the office. I, on the other hand, am a dirty boot in the field, touching things project manager. Very different. I have been asked recently in my time with engineering firms to do that from an office. It's very hard for me. I do it. I'm successful, but I'm very tactile, right? And I ask all those kids in front of us, I was like, well, which one do you want to be? Because it's very different lines of work. You say project management, like, ta-da, it's project management. There's 4 kinds of chocolate cake. Like, which one are you? Which one do you want to be? There's project managers that are really just a coordinator and a scheduler. There's project managers that are like Chris, that can do everything from the office, everything remotely, and are very impactful. There's project managers like me that like to be on the ground talking with the individuals and knowing where that project's going. I still do a ton of stuff from an office, but I like being out there. So I think sometimes they think they have a choice made, and then, you drop something like that on them and they're going, oh no, I got to you don't have to reset. Don't restart. Just focus up, right? Figure it out.
But what they have to realize is it's to their benefit to do this work now.
100%.
And I think that conversation is what's so critical, is now they know they have options, and they know that they need to work on, I don't know how young a kids, I'm with you, anybody. Yeah, they're kids as far as I'm concerned, but I don't know how old they were, but I never had the opportunity to have the exposure to someone to say, hey, you look like you're kind of going down this path. Is that what you want? Because it could branch out here. It could branch out here. Just start thinking now about what opportunities might be available to you in your career so that when opportunities do arise, you know where you actually want to go instead of decisions being made for you.
100%. That's the thing. Like, one of them cornered me afterwards and was like, "Hey, that was great information." It scared me to death because I thought, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to be an office project manager." And that's not that's not the picture. He was like, "You talked about a picture of it, right?" And the picture is me like you in the field at a job trailer every day going, "Okay, how am I managing my project?" And I was like, "Yeah, chances are there's a much greater need for the other PM, right? Much greater need for the person that's remote based, is working from home, working in an office, just making sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed and everything's on schedule." And so there's a group of us that are very field oriented that do the exact same thing. It's just, we do it different. It's hard to get into how the sausage is made, right? People just want to buy the sausage. And sometimes they get heartbroken over how it's made. Both ways get you a great product, just different ways of doing it.
I didn't even learn a lot of those distinctions until the last couple of years when I started meeting guys in the construction industry that were project managers. And, I'm being in the utility space myself, we're all project managers. And then I start hearing what they're doing, managing 10, $20 million projects. And that's like, yeah, that's not what I do. So I started calling myself, I'm more of a pre-construction project manager.
Yeah.
Of course, with our trunk lines that we build, they would be considered on a small scale compared to what you're used to, but if we're talking about 6 or 8 inch HDPE pipe for a couple of miles, I mean, that's pretty limited scope compared to what you're doing. But my specialty is in the planning and managing the permitting side and juggling property owners and easements and right-of-way permits, dealing with municipalities, all of that sort of thing that would probably bore you to tears. You're right though. There's a place for everybody, but you have to know what you're comfortable with. And I don't know how much of it comes from your background and where you start. The fact that I started in an office environment doing CAD work and came up that way and eventually got my degree, versus you who has the experience side of it and is coming. There's this convergence of what you do and I do from a different perspectives, but those two worlds would probably never cross. They work really good together, but your experiences, and I've met other project managers who are the same way, but it's a really good fit because they can explain to me the field side of why something won't work or how to do it more efficiently. And I can explain to them sometimes why the bureaucracy is so slow, even though I don't like it and I'm not defending it. Why things on the back end with permitting and whatnot take so much time, land acquisition and that sort of thing.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like, for me, I'm bending my knee. I'm bending her ear every day. She's 13. She's still making her mind up about everything in her world. But we were having that discussion about, she came up just by herself to hang with my wife and I for a week. And I said, "What are you thinking about? Like, what's your future look like? What's the 18-year-old you look like? And what are you doing? What the 25-year-old you?" And she's like, "I don't know. She's always been artistic and she likes art." And so I'm going, I get it. Like, I would hope you would let me introduce you to some tradespeople. And she's like, "Well, yeah, I trust you." And that's because the reality is, like, that's how I always viewed my welding. It was an art form for me. It was a very zen place for me to get under the hood. And there's so much static in my head, like just every minute of every day. When I struck an arc and I had that little blue light, everything shut off. It was quiet. The static quit. I didn't learn how to weld. I was naturally good at welding. Some people, you throw them car keys and they are instant race car drivers. That's kind of my welding career. I never had a welding job. I started pipeline welding. I was never a welder's helper, right? I wasn't cut out for it that way for whatever reason. I think it's valuable to have those experiences. It's just not the path I took. I was naturally very good at it, and I progressed very quickly once I started doing it. And it's one of those things where, like I was explaining to her, it was an art form for me. It's not paints or markers and a canvas, but it was metal and rods and a pipe, right? And I could do cool things with that no matter what type of metal it was. And no matter where the pipe was, whether it's a refinery, a nuclear plant, on a right of way in the middle of nowhere, it's one of those things where you just, for me, I leaned into the artistic side of it, that every one of those was different and every one of them was unique. And she went way down the rabbit hole with me, right? Well, is it that way everywhere? What about with this? What about with that? Do I have to go into pipelining? Can I go into this? Well, what about? And for me, it was great because she was pulling stuff out of her recent time where she had been adjacent to other trade, right? And me being her trusted knowledge person for that kind of stuff, I don't care which one, right? Just if you want to go to college, I wish I hadn't sometimes. It's a piece of paper. I don't even know where it's at anymore, but it's somewhere, I'm sure. And it's one of those things where I go, do something where you are going to derive some self-worth. Your identity shouldn't come from work, but we're lying to ourselves if we say it does that. We all gather that. And so I'm going to do something that you aren't embarrassed to align your identity to as well. I was always proud of being a pipeline welder. I wasn't always proud of some of my coworkers that were a little off the edge, but I was always proud of what I did. And I was always excited about what I did and where it was. I think it was 97 or 98. It was my technically second pipeline. My uncle, we had 700 and some odd person spread in Maine. And it was the very first natural gas to hit Maine. It was Maritime's Northeast Duke project. And those people had no clue what we were building, right? You install pipe most other places in the country. They're like, oh, a pipeline. These people are like, what on earth are you doing? Well, this is natural gas. They don't understand. They're heating oil, wood. And it's hard, even at my young age, I was like right at 18, trying to explain to them what we were doing and why it was important. And at the basis, I'm going, it's a financial thing. I monetize everything. It's probably a horrible mistake, but I said, what do you pay for heating oil every year? This is about what natural gas costs me. At that point, I lived in Colorado too. This is what natural gas costs me in Colorado. Like, I'm not spending anywhere near what you are. You should be excited about this. But I think that's one of those things where, again, and I'm so random, I apologize, but a very dyslexic thinker, if you will. But I started advocating for our industry from a young age. The trades, paramount importance to us. And now in the full circle, I'm back on the environmental side of this going, it's not going to go away. Like, we can argue about it and we can push against it. And I think some of it's a little overreaching, but not going anywhere. Like, you can throw a tantrum, but it's still going to be there. Unlike your parents, you're not going to get a sucker and get quieted down. You're going to have to throw the tantrum again because it's not going away. So why not lean in and help get it going the way you need it to go, right? Help push it and drive it a little.
How do we attract that younger generation more into this world? Have you seen anything particular that's working well, or what would you look for, suggest?
Yeah, I don't know. I talk to everybody I can, but obviously I like to talk. AMP, formerly NACE, SSPC, they do a great program called Emerge. It's an acronym. I should know what the acronym is, but I don't. But it's about engaging younger generation and telling them about coatings, corrosion, materials, protection, performance, all that fun stuff, right? The lady that runs that, Kim Ray, amazing person. You should connect with her on LinkedIn. If you don't, doing some great stuff. They are engaging kids, very specifically kids at an elementary level. They've got a thing called a C kit. It's a little corrosion kit. It's kind of the same stuff we had in science class, like the potato clock kind of level stuff, right? It shows them how a corrosion cell works, shows them anodic, cathodic, all the kind of stuff. Really neat. And it's a kit. When we go to conference, you can volunteer to help assemble those kits so they can distribute them. And they're hitting them at that level. My counterpart to my union, 208 in Denver, they have a really great group that is hitting middle schools and high schools. Every time there's a career fair, every time there's like parent teacher day, they set up a booth. They even take out their training trail and set up in the parking lot. Let kids get their hands on pipe fitter tools, right? Let them see some of this stuff. So, there's really great things going on in those spaces. dare I say, I wish I could be more involved in that kind of area and arena to get the more youthful kind of investment. I, here I do stuff with OSU IT. I don't know. Like, I wish I could do more. I want to do more. It's a bandwidth issue always. We've got work commitments and all kind of other stuff too. I I also don't want to forget about people like me that are doing late career transition, right? They're have spent 20 years doing one thing. They want to do something adjacent, or maybe they don't. Maybe they want to be way far away from it and get a new field. And I want to go, yeah, it's not rocket surgery, right? Like, this is fairly simple stuff sometimes. It takes a baseline mechanical aptitude in most instances, but you can get some certifications. They're expensive, but there's companies you can work for that'll get you the certifications. They'll pay for that part of your education. And I think and some of those companies are really good about sharing that. Though, there's a couple here in Tulsa in the CP world that, hey, we're hiring for cathodic protection technicians. This is the deal. We'll send you to training. We'll get you the cert. They just want you to sign on and stay with them for a little bit of time. That's a great opportunity. It's a well-paying industry. Depending on who you ask, corrosion's billions of dollars a year, right?
I was just talking to someone about leadership development in the space yesterday, and one of the key pivotal points, I think we talk a lot about how to get the younger generation involved. And I said, one thing that I would really like to see is how do we focus on identifying the guys in the field that have that field and more of the mechanical knowledge, and preserve that by bringing them into the office and being able to utilize that, because you can't replicate that with a bunch of college grads like me.
Good luck.
Right? I mean, you just can't. And to take it even further, there's guys older than you that have spent even further in their career. How much could we extend their careers if we brought them in? Now, the problem with that is they have to, you could say, hey, I really want you to come in and do this, and they're going to feel like they're being put out to pasture. And that's not the intent. The goal is more to facilitate that knowledge transfer, the industry knowledge transfer. And because we always talk about, that's one of the things that
Critical.
we're really going to be suffering from in the next couple of years as this whole generation retires. It's kind of one of the first times that we've had the generation that created and built a lot of this stuff is going to start to retire. So I don't know how we do that just as a community and as a nation. I think it's going to be critical, and to kind of everybody up the chain, but I think it has to be very intentional, right?
Yeah.
You said you had people that advocated for you. You worked on your own self-awareness to know where your goals are. What should that look like?
Well, and if I tell my personal story here, it's painful. I was met with hostility from my peers. I can't believe you want to take this welder foreman job. I turned it down, and I was like, yeah, I know you turned it down. That's why they asked me. And I'm okay that I was the ninth choice, right? Like, I've been self-promoting and campaigning for this job, and I was still not the first choice or the second or third, right? I should have been embarrassed, but I was so proud. And I'm having this conversation with exactly the person you're talking about. Solid white hair, somebody that imparted a lot of knowledge on me, was not afraid of knowledge transfer once they knew I was serious. However, I can't believe you'd want to do that paperwork. I can't believe you want that headache. And I said, let me put it to you very simply. And I said, and I used their own stuff for them because that was always their approach with me. Well, I'm going to give it to you really simply. And I said, the point is, if I don't take this, the person that's going to be in charge of you and I and all this work is going to be a brand new college graduate. And they know nothing about the work we do. They know nothing about the physical labor. They know nothing about how thankless it is out here.
Yeah.
They know the baseline rule book, right? And they're getting hired because of their knowledge of the rule book. They know the program, which means they know the players, which means they can get to the end of the game. I said,
The theory.
yeah, or I can take the job and I'm going to advocate for us because I'm here in the trenches with you and I came from the trenches with you. And then we're going to run this job the way we feel like it should be, and yet the way our owner and our boss wants it run as well. But we're going to do it from our viewpoint. And we're going to get little wins here and there because we know how to be a little bit more efficient because we're tired of doing it this way, right? And he, he put his arm around me. He's like, "You're right. Can't believe I've let us down. They've offered me that job for 10 years and I kept pushing it off because I don't want to deal with that headache. I'm really glad you're here." And I said, "Yeah, but that's the deal. I shouldn't be your only knowledge transfer. I hope there's somebody else that you like." He was kind of a painful old man to be around. I love him to death, but not always enjoyable, just crusty and salty about everything. And I'd go, I need you to be less of that and just try and make a friend on every job. Try and grab one person, because in all of my time, the thing I know is that there is always somebody that shows up with a notepad and a pencil and starts taking notes. There's always somebody paying attention. If you can grab them, nurture them, empower them a little bit, support them every way you can, you're going to build something amazing and you'll get to see it, right? Be a little selfish. Know that you're going to, even if it's just quietly, take claim to their success. Like, you'll get to do that and go, "Hey, I helped that," right? I built part of that. Yeah, it's always on them. They're the ones that have to run with it. But, my push with him was to encourage more people to do what I did and quit like labeling it as such a bad thing. When I went to Excel into the engineering firm after that, young welders my age, that I know, "I can't believe you sold out and you're in the office. You're a carpet walker." Everybody called me a carpet walker. And I said, like, it's hard, but again, I'm doing this for us. You finally have an engineer in an engineering office at a management level that understands what it's like to put pipe together in a ditch, and to do it in flat Oklahoma, to do it in mountainous Colorado, West Virginia, to do it everywhere in the country. Like, you ought to be really happy, not mad. You shouldn't call me a sellout.
It's the crabs in the bucket mentality, unfortunately.
Yeah, they're going to pull you down every time.
Yeah.
And they don't mean to. It's not the intent, right?
It's the culture, unfortunately, and that's what we have to break.
That's it. That's what we have to break. That's the cycle that if we can get a link out of that cycle, it helps, right? And I don't want to take credit for everything that I do. There's so many people that have supported and pushed and pulled strings for me. And I think that's the biggest part about giving back, is to do that every chance you get. And I'm not telling you to waste time on people that aren't worth wasting time on, but they're easy to spot, man. They usually put their hand up. They're usually volunteering for some stuff because they want to know more. They want to learn more. I'm going, just find them and dump on them, pour into them in a positive way, knowledge transfer and all of it.
And to your first analogy about, talking to the older boss, the older gentleman, I never thought about this before, but I get frustrated when we talk about how the younger generation can't do this. And maybe there's some work ethic things. I mean, everybody says the next generation is softer. I think there's some truth to it. I think just because we progress as a society and life gets easier overall, frankly. But we talk about how they don't know how to do anything. Well, maybe that means it's my responsibility to teach them, to bring them along the way somebody brought me along. Okay, maybe not the exact same way.
Right.
But productively, right? Yeah. Without the hazing. But in the same manner, the guys that are the older generation, they've never been expected to mentor. They've never been asked to mentor. They don't know how to mentor. So, but I mean, you really opened his eyes to, wow, we do have a responsibility here to bring the younger generation along. And it's tough to face your own mortality, even if it's just your working years, to say, I'm not going to be around here forever. How do we do this knowledge transfer? And what is the best use of maybe I don't need to be turning the wrench. Maybe I need to be helping the guys behind me in learning how to work more efficiently and do the jobs. And we've all never been here before, right?
Yeah. Somebody was the first somewhere every time.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly it. I was at R.B. Williamson had an open house. The family that founded T.D. Williamson way back when, they bought back their original building. They had this open house on Flight. It was great, cool people. And I've got a friend over there, Larry Oswald, an antique old man, been in this industry forever, and a positive attitude, game changer kind of guy. Brilliant. I could drive a railroad spike in my temple, and he'd still be smarter than me. But him and I go down the same rabbit holes, and it's super fun to be around him and just talk and walk through a crowd. And lunch last year, we went down the CO2 pipeline retrofit corrosion. I mean, this got lost in an afternoon.
Fun party favors discussions,
Yeah.
right?
And so him and I went there specifically to see him and organized a handful of friends to meet up there so we could all kind of talk and industry share. And Larry, he asked that question because he knows my motivation is what can I do today to make tomorrow better? Industry, personally, just across the board. I want to just small needle increment movement. And he goes, what are you doing? Like, tell me what you're doing. What are you shaping? What's it look like? Where's it at? And all this stuff. And I said, well, tell me what you're doing. You always get to go first. Like, I want to know what you're doing. Well, we're doing this mentor thing. And I said, well, but is it dual pattern? Is it both ways? What do you mean? And I said, it needs to mentor down as much as it needs to mentor up. Have you found a youthful young kid to help you be more digitally engaged? Get out of my face. And I was like, you know what I mean? You do a decent job, but you should have a partner. This mentor mentee is not you because you're gray to them because they're not. It both. And he's great about that. I'm not picking on him. He would love if he watched this, but it's about what am I learning from them as much as I'm trying to do that knowledge transfer. It's as equally important because it helps with knowledge transfer because they see that investment, and it helps because it gets them more plugged into it. It gets that youthful person going, I am of value. The same problem that most of our older folks have, right? I've spent my whole career in this and I feel like I'm not of value anymore. Well, grab a kid, grab somebody new to the industry, even if they're not a kid. They might have gray hair like you, but they have never done this before. They're new to utilities. They're new to natural gas or electric power generation, whatever it is. And hey, this is how we do this, right? I get ticky. I look at people's LinkedIn and it's like major companies and they're not putting ats in front of the people's names they're calling out in their post. They're not even putting the at in front of their own company name within their post. Like, what are you doing? It's literally the only social media I have, but I feel like I know how to do it with a little bit of success. I've watched a handful of YouTube videos. I am a master of it. If I can learn that, like, so can everybody else, you know? And I think that's the thing, like Larry touched on, and, you know, part of what I love about him is very open to the communication and is looking for the next step up. And in this aspect, he's going, well, step down would be a step up because I'm stepping down to them and that helps them. And, you know, we go through this cycle and start running down that rabbit hole of that's one of those ways to make the industry better. But like you say, you got to tell people more often than not, you're going to run into what you and I ran into, right? You're going to run into, I can't believe you're going to do that. I can't believe you'd take that job. Well, be ready for it and have an argument for it, an educated argument. Not like, you know,
There's there's a guy that studies generational research, and his name's Dorsey. Anybody that listens to the podcast on a regular basis, I apologize. I'm probably quoting the same three people. But, you know, one of the things that he talks about was, he says, well, for one thing, it's the first time we've ever had 5 generations in the workforce together. So we're going to have to figure out how to work together. But he said that historically, that knowledge transfer has always been top down, right? Because it's always been kind of ivory tower preserved at the top and how to work and industry knowledge and whatnot. But for the first time, the leverage is in the hands of the younger generation from a technology standpoint, because they know and understand the technologies that we're all going to be working with in the future. So in order to get ahead of the curve, it has to be not only top down, but bottom up. And the beautiful part is that's exactly the entry point into how to integrate them into the workforce and how to combine the strengths of every generation into the workforce to build that team. Never before has the younger generation had so much to offer as a contributor, not just the person that's just trying to absorb everything. Now they actually have something they can give back. But we have to appreciate that and understand that and expect it of them to help us in that and how we bring it into the workforce. And we know that the technology aspect is just going to continue to snowball, and it escalates at an exponential rate. it doesn't even just multiply, it's all exponential.
100%.
And so, no, I think you're exactly right. And I think that's a good excuse for us to be building these teams, these mentoring teams that way.
Well, they don't even have to be at your employment. And that's the deal. Like, I feel like mine are scattered. They work for everybody and everywhere. And it's more of we try and get together and share notes. Where are you at? Where's the struggle? What are you doing?
Well, it has to be that kid that shows up with the pen and the notebook looking to take notes, right? Because everybody's not ready for that. It has to be the one that's eager to learn and wants to contribute.
That's right.
And that's still a very small percentage of the population, I believe. Going back to that whole discussion, he's talking to a guy, he's 29, 30, has come up from the bottom, at this utility company. And he was saying he's always high discipline, high drive, just wants to be better. And he's kind of experienced that crabs in the bucket mentality, and he's always said, no, when I'm leading the group, when I'm supervising the group or whatever, it's going to be different. I'm going to treat people right. We're going to do things right. And I'm doing it for the betterment of all of us. And then he got turned down for a promotion for some sort of a head supervisor or inspector role. But then they kind of tapped him on the shoulder and said, hey, we want you to come work on the office doing these things. We want you to learn this mapping technology that we use. And at first, he was extremely honored, but he's like, kind of feel like a sellout. It's exactly what you were saying. He's like, I feel like I'm turning my back on all these field guys that I was supposed to be representing.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what's the goal? If it's to have the maximum amount of influence and impact on them, I mean, you can speak on their behalf when you're there with them. When you're actually in that office, when you are in that room, you are representing them.
100%.
And I have no doubt, even being as young as he is, that, with that high drive, he's going to pick up very quickly on whatever that technology is and bring a perspective to that team that wasn't there before. And it's going to benefit everybody.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And if I go back to one of the things you said too about, like, the engaging down and up with that youth, you're going to build a little bit, and loyalty is a dirty word for me, right? If you want loyalty, you can get a pet, but that gets built into it when you show people their worth in your organization and you invest in them and you invest in top down and bottom up with that individual to go, you're a value and we don't want it so we can use you. We want it so we can be better, right? There's definitely a point there, right? And those people are going to, by default, be a little bit more loyal. And that's one of the things for me. You and I talked about it on a personal call that there's a lot of math out there to support this, but you can stay at your job and you'll get roughly 3% plus or minus a little bit for a raise every year. Or you can leave your job and get a 15 to 20% raise, like fairly factual round numbers. And kids are aware of that. My dad, one job, 18 till he retired with 32 years from him then. And then he went to work for my union as a helper and spent another 10 or 12 years there. It's one of those things, like his generation is very committed, hate their job. My dad despised his job for most of his career. He would have been so much better off to do something else. I probably would have been happier if he would have done something else. You would have had the trickle down effect of it. But you deal with somebody who's miserable at their job. Why? Like, why be unhappy? There's lots of people that need your skills and services. Be somewhere you can be happy. Be somewhere you can be impactful. And that's what you do with that up and down kind of investment is you make that person impactful in that organization, whether it's at a little tiny local level or whether it's industry wide or even company wide, right? Whether it's a small or large company, that is powerful stuff. And it creates a bunch of internal advocates going, man, this is why you should work at ABC Utility. This is why you should work at ABC Engineering, whatever it is. So valuable. And that's the thing, like I'll tell people, I kind of held the same job for 23, 25 years. But in my last 9, I've had 6 different employers, right? Like I move around a little. One, I'm trying to feel myself out. I'm trying to find the sweet spot for me. And 2, like I want to be impactful. I don't want to be bored. I want somebody that's going to engage me. I want somebody that's going to allow me to engage. And And that's what you get when you invest in that person. Say, I know you're new to this, but you are very impactful. Your knowledge is of value to us, and not just in a selfish way. Your knowledge is valuable because you're bringing this to the table that helps us advance, helps us be better.
You use the word impactful, and where you are at a place in your life right now. And that really hits home with me as well. The book that I'm reading right now is called Halftime by Bob Buford. I think it's an older book. I need to research that. I don't think it's particularly new, but it's written from a very Christian biblical standpoint, but he talks a lot about, it's still a very good book, even for somebody that's not religious, but he talks about how that pull that we start feeling when we get into those early 40s, into our 40s, of something internal in us changes, and the vast majority of people never can listen to it to identify it, but those that do make changes in their life. And he said what it is, he said, up until the age of 40-ish, whenever it hits you, it's all about drive for success. And then once we reach a certain age and we feel like that we've accomplished it, it's not about the chase anymore as much as it used to be. You're more interested in your impact, the effects that you can have in raising others up and what you can do for others. And he said the ones that everybody tends to hear the voice, the ones that can listen to it and make that transition are the ones that really go on to have impactful second half of their life. It's from success to significance.
Yeah, that's huge.
He said you go from chasing success in the first half of our lives to chasing significance or having a deeper purpose. And he talks about when he was in sales, in his 20s and 30s, he said it's all about the next deal. And you get the next deal and you get that high and it's on to the next deal. And even when you do have a good perspective about it, that's what he said. I didn't just chase money, but still the thrill was in the deal. And I'm not about that life anymore. I'm more interested in how I can give back to those that are just coming up themselves. And I think that's critical. And I think this entire conversation has kind of reflected, without even doing it intentionally, has kind of reflected both of us and where we are in our lives, honestly.
Yeah, for sure. It's all about significance. And it's not even, I think the one thing too, that it's less about my legacy. It's more about our industry legacy. Like, this is good stuff. I don't doubt that someday gas will be a minor blip in our energy structure. It'll always be around for power generation, never going to disappear from it. One of the best most efficient BTU out there. But let's be honest. Like, there are parts of the country that have eliminated new natural gas construction. I hope that goes away and it swings back the way it should be. But I understand it too. Like, those people are fearful. They've had major incidences related to natural gas. And it was, whether it was a mistake or just poor processes in place, right? It happens and that's scary. But that's one of those things. If we are significant in what we're doing, if we're impactful in what we're doing, that industry is going to be better for it. And that's where it should be. That's where our time should be invested and all that fun stuff. I mean, I got to have money for gas on the motorcycle, right? There's people that need gas on their boat. So we work for that. We do those things. But at the end of the day, I think that's, like you said, that's where you and I are at. That's where a lot of folks are at, is how am I being impactful? Is this a significant thing that I'm doing? And where is that significance at? Because that's what makes you sleep at night. That's what gives you the warm fuzzies and all the stuff. You can go anywhere and make a paycheck.
Yep. Well, man, I appreciate it.
Yeah, I love it.
Such a great time talking to you. Is there any final thoughts? I mean, that's a pretty good way to put a bow on the end of it, but where can people find you, and any last thing that you'd like to leave everybody with?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Love to connect with folks on there. You're more than welcome to reach out. Andy Shingledecker. I'm easy to find. That's really the only social thing I have anyway. So it's the email and phone number. And if you get to me on there, you have those anyway. So yeah, it's, just do good. That's, at the end of the day, it's really about, like, do good, be a nice human, like, thank people, hold doors open for random strangers. Like, it sounds silly, but
it matters though.
It does, man. We were at lunch on Sunday at Hideaway and somebody smiled at me, right? And the two switches go off in your brain. But like, I start giggling to myself and I was like, what's wrong with you? And I was like, that person smiled at me. And she's like, they're not flirting with you. And I'm like, I get it. what it was, somebody just genuinely nice that I didn't know smile. Like, and it warmed my heart, made me happy and giddy for like a split second. And
No.
it changes your day, man. That's awesome stuff. It's like, just do that. Like, just do good things.
Awesome. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah,
Great
thank
talking to
you.
you. Talk later. Thank you for listening to the Building Blocks podcast. If you found anything beneficial from today, I would appreciate you reaching out and letting me know on LinkedIn. I'm always looking for ways to add value to the listeners and interviewing leaders in our industry. If you found this helpful, I would appreciate if you leave us a review and reach out to me on LinkedIn and give me some feedback. In addition, if you know someone that would be good for an interview, please let me know and I'd be happy to connect with them. You can find myself and any of the other guests on LinkedIn, where we continue the conversations about leadership, careers, growth, and development.